Hey, Rob Tepper here, robtepper.com, and I just got back from a few days in Chicago. And when you live in San Diego, which is paradise, you know, it's hard to go anywhere and not compare and contrast what it is that you love about where you live. So this was my first time in Chicago in many years, and it was actually the first time that I stayed in Chicago as kind of a resident, because my daughter moved there a few months back, and she lives in the middle of Chicago. Like, I didn't know the layout of the downtown area at all, but I can tell you now that if you ever go to Chicago, you should stay with my daughter, because that place where she lives is, first of all, it's an amazing complex. You know, when you live in the city, as opposed to where I live in suburbia in San Diego, everything is relatively spread out, not as much as in mid-America or even on the East Coast, but compared to, you know, your entire life, what we have in a whole a condo complex or a townhouse complex with facilities. In my daughter's high-rise 28-floor building, they have all of that right there, including a pool on the roof with an amazing view of all of Chicago. And that's incredible. And then they have a gym, and they have a whole party room on the top floor. They have a room on the 7th floor where you have coffee, a dispenser that you just push a button and you get your hot coffee in the morning, and a little dog walk there, and pool table in that room, and a nice big screen TV. So essentially there's all these common areas in a beautiful building. So if you're living in a city, in the middle of a city, that's the way to do it. And when you walk out of the front door, you can just walk anywhere. So I was at an event that was at the W Hotel, less than a mile away. I could walk there. Now, comparing that to San Diego, by the time that I walked to this event, 0.8 miles away, on a summer day in Chicago, I was just dripping. I was sweating. I needed to change my clothes. So that is one big difference. We don't have that issue here in San Diego. Another issue is the crazy storms and the rain. You know, it does rain here every now and then. It is a myth that it never rains in Southern California, because it actually rains occasionally. But the rain that I saw in Chicago, it's like a typical, stereotypical East Coast storm. Right around midday, the sky just turns so pitch black. It doesn't turn that black here in San Diego, and I knew it was going to rain. And then the rain just started coming down in buckets. And I was in the middle of the city, right outside of Gibson's Restaurant, a famous landmark where my daughter works. That's part of the reason I was there. So I was watching the rain start to come down slowly, and then just come down in buckets. And it came down so hard for so long, people were trying to wait under awnings to get out, to be able to cross the street, to get, you know, back to work or wherever they were going. And finally, people just had to make a run for it. It was funny seeing the bicyclists as the sky was extremely dark. And then a few minutes later, I saw them just soaked. The rain was coming down, and I was just standing there observing that. So that's a difference. You know, you got the weather. But also in Chicago, when it rains like that, once the rain stops, a couple hours later, there's no sign at all that there was even a storm. Everything is dry. It's beautiful sun. People are back up on the rooftop pool. So that's very cool. So there's a beautiful Millennium Park, which has what they call the Bean, that you've probably seen lots of pictures of. Really great tourist attractions. There's a Trump apartment complex and hotel that has a 16th floor that it's maybe the highest, best restaurant for you to be able to go and sit out on a balcony and see Chicago. There's a lot of high areas to see Chicago from. And another big interesting difference in Chicago, it's more like Amsterdam than it is like Manhattan or San Diego, in that there is water in Chicago in several places. You know, when you're walking down a city street, there's a big canal that feeds into Lake Michigan, I guess. But that is kind of cool. It makes for some very, very scenic views, and I took some great pictures of that. You know, the nightlife in Chicago, actually, there's a lot of, I think the clubs stop serving alcohol at 2. They might even close at 2. But there is a big after-hours nightlife in Chicago, so it's a little bit closer to New York. Talking to some people that had been in New York and moved to Chicago, they found that Chicago is much more laid back and less intense. And that's funny because compared to San Diego, you know, it's a step up. So, and that's, I think people from San Diego find Chicago to be a little bit easier to adjust to than New York. So if you want to just go to an extreme, you go from San Diego to New York. If you want to take a little slower, you wind up in Chicago. People there are great. It's a great town. There was actually entertainment going on out at that Millennium Park that I mentioned. You know, they take advantage when it is beautiful weather. In San Diego, it's always beautiful weather. There's always something to do. But when you live in a place like Chicago, it's not always beautiful. When it is, everybody's out. And there were tons of people out at Millennium Park. And let's see, other attractions are the former Sears Tower is now the Willis Tower, so you can go up there and do the observation deck there. And there's also the John Hancock Building has an observation deck. So I think that if you just have limited time, Millennium Park, Trump, and you know, it's funny, when I first saw the Trump building, it's like I saw it from an angle where you actually couldn't see the name of it, and I said that couldn't be the Trump building because it would have his name on it. We know that Trump puts his name on everything. When I finally saw the name on the Trump building, it is as big as you would imagine. You know, he has, you can't miss the fact that that is the Trump International or whatever it's called, but a gorgeous building. So there's the Trump, the Willis, former Sears Tower, great view, and the John Hancock. And I don't, you know, and the subways. Last thing, okay, when you get to Chicago, whether either airport that you come into is not that convenient to the city. If you have to take a cab, it's going to be a fairly high rate. But you can also take the subway, and if you're comfortable riding on trains, you can get either from Chicago O'Hare or from Midway right into the middle of the city for less than $5 and in less than 40 minutes. So that was a beautiful thing, made it so convenient. You can get around the city also on the subways and also on foot. And I learned a new noun/verb while I was there. What's now changing and revolutionizing transportation in Chicago is Uber, which is kind of a taxi but personally owned, UBER. They're going to become, it's going to become a common household word soon around the country, but very big in Chicago right now. And the FOBs, you know, you got to know about the FOBs. So FOB and Uber, these two words that are both nouns and verbs. You got to have your FOB to get up onto the 28th floor of your building. You need to control, everything is controlled access in these buildings, which is kind of interesting and makes it kind of secure. So I learned about FOBs and Ubers, had some amazing time with my daughter. I also learned, confirmed that when you're visiting people who are close to you, I had a choice to stay in a hotel or to stay with her. Chicago is expensive, so you don't want to stay in a hotel if you don't have to, but you also don't want to inconvenience people. But when you do stay with people, it's a very different type of a visit, right? It's much more spontaneous. Even if I had been at a hotel across the street from my daughter, the time that we spent together would not have been nearly as high quality as just being able to, you know, wake up and be around each other. So that's not Chicago specific, but that is a little bit about my recollections of my Chicago experience. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Rob Tepper. I'll see you next time.